and two C-17 Globemasters of the Indian Air Force participate in the fly-past. In fact, a 269-member contingent of the Indian Armed Forces marched alongside their French counterparts during the Bastille Day celebrations that mark the French National Day. Bastille Day holds a special significance this year as India and France are marking 25 years of their strategic partnership. Prime Minister Modi said this was a reflection of the unbreakable friendship between India and France. On Thursday, French President Emmanuel Macron hosted a private dinner for Prime Minister Modi at Elysee Palace and conferred on him the Grand Cross of the Legion of Honor, the highest French honor in military or civilian orders. This makes Prime Minister Modi the first Indian Prime Minister to receive the award. Earlier in the day, the Prime Minister addressed the Indian diaspora in Paris and made some important announcements. India's most successful payment system, Unified Payment System or UPI, will now be used in France, starting with the Eiffel Tower. That means Indian tourists will now be able to pay in rupees. Also, Indian students pursuing their masters in France will now be eligible for a 5-year work visa as opposed to the current 2-year visa. India will open a new consulate in Marseille. Interestingly, while talking about the people-to-people connect between India and France, Prime Minister Modi said star French footballer Kylian Mbappe has more fans in India than in France. After the Bastille Day celebrations today, Prime Minister Modi met with the President of the French National Assembly. The business end of the Prime Minister's visit kicks off later today. The Prime Minister will have a ceremonial reception at the Elysee Palace. This will be followed by delegation-level talks between the Prime Minister and French President Emmanuel Macron. The two leaders will also participate in the India-France CEO Forum, and later in the evening, Macron will host a state banquet for Prime Minister Modi at the iconic Louvre Museum complex in Paris. The banquet will be attended by 250 dignitaries. The two leaders will witness the fireworks display over Eiffel Tower from the terrace at the Louvre. As for the concrete outcomes that are expected from this visit, defense ties between the two countries are likely to take center stage. Some big-ticket defense deals are likely to be inked. Most importantly, India's procurement of 26 Rafale marine fighter jets and 3 Scorpion submarines for the Indian Navy worth 90,000 crore. A deal to jointly develop an aircraft engine in India with transfer of technology is also expected to be signed. Prime Minister Modi and President Macron are likely to discuss cooperation in areas of civil nuclear technology, counter-terrorism, cybersecurity, space research, trade and investment, and climate change. A big part of the discussions will hinge on co-production and co-development of military hardware, with a focus on India's goal of self-reliance that has emerged as the leitmotif of its defense and foreign policy in recent times. Something that was quite evident even during Prime Minister Modi's recent state visit to the US. So what are the key takeaways likely to be, and how significant is this visit in further cementing India-France ties?
आज दुनिया का 46% रियल टाइम डिजिटल ट्रांजैक्शन भारत में होता है। और मैं आपको भी चुनौती देता हूं कि अगली बार आप भारत में आए तो जेब में एक भी पैसा लिए बिना निकलिए घर से। खाली जेब, सिर्फ मोबाइल फोन पर यूपीआई ऐप को डाउनलोड करके रख लीजिए। आप पूरा हिंदुस्तान घूम करके आएंगे, एक नए पैसे कैश की जरूरत के बिना आप अपना गुजारा कर सकते हैं। तब तय हुआ था कि फ्रांस में पढ़ने वाले भारतीय स्टूडेंट्स को 2 साल का पोस्ट स्टडी वर्क वीजा दिया जाएगा। अब ये भी निर्णय लिया गया है कि फ्रांस में मास्टर्स करने वाले भारतीयों को 5 साल का लॉन्ग टर्म पोस्ट स्टडी वीजा दिया जाएगा। मेरा आपसे आग्रह है, आपको अब भारत में निवेश के लिए भी पूरे उत्साह से आगे आना होगा। भारत अब अगले 25 वर्षों में विकसित होने के लक्ष्य पर काम कर रहा है। इसमें आपकी भूमिका भी बड़ी है। आप जिस भी सेक्टर में काम कर रहे हैं उससे जुड़ी संभावनाओं को जरूर भारत में एक्सप्लोर करें। आज हर इंटरनेशनल एजेंसी कह रही है कि भारत आगे बढ़ रहा है, भारत ब्राइट स्पॉट है। भारत में इन्वेस्टमेंट की अभूतपूर्व अपॉर्चुनिटी बन रही है। आप भारत में इन्वेस्ट करिए। और आप जो जब कह रहा हूं ना, तो बाद में शिकायत मत करना कि मोदी ने तो बताया ही नहीं था। अभी अवसर है, और मैंने तो लाल किले से कहा था, यही समय है, सही समय है।
All right. So as we said, the business end of this two-day visit in a sense kicks off this evening and some key outcomes are expected. Let's now understand the significance of this visit and what we can expect with our panel of experts. Joining me on the show tonight, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat, Vice Admiral Ajendra Bahadur Singh, former naval officer, and Captain D.K. Sharma, former spokesperson for the Indian Navy. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let me start with Ambassador Prabhu Dayal. Sir, the Prime Minister, of course, was the guest of honor at the Bastille Day Parade, which this year marks 25 years of the strategic partnership between India and France. The Prime Minister says this is a reflection of the unbreakable friendship between India and France. He's referred to it as a long-standing and time-tested partnership. Apart from the fact that there are some big-ticket defense deals that are in the works, and we will discuss that in great detail, but for you, looking at the big picture, how significant is this visit? And how important a role do you think it could play in further cementing ties between India and France?
Well, Neha, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. Let me straight away mention that this visit is highly significant, and it signifies the great importance now being attached to India on the global stage, and the extremely high stature which our Prime Minister has achieved in the international arena. It's a great honor that he has been invited as the chief guest for the Bastille Day Parade. It's also a great honor that the Legion of Honor has been, the Cross of the Legion of Honor has been conferred on him. But look at the background in which this visit is taking place. In the month of May, Prime Minister was invited as a guest to the G7 summit in Tokyo, in Japan. After that, he was invited as a state guest to Australia, where he received a rousing welcome and where he took the relationship to greater heights. Then last month, that is in June, he was invited as a state guest to the United States. There again, he received a rousing welcome and he signed some extremely important agreements. And now he is in France, where he is a state guest, he is the chief guest at the Bastille Day Parade, and is being hailed as an international leader of the highest stature. So it is a matter of pride for India that its Prime Minister is being treated in such a grand manner, and that India has been recognized as a country of such importance. Secondly, as you mentioned, the high point of the visit is going to be the aspect of defense cooperation. You have defense experts here on the panel, but let me mention that even for a layman, to have Indian soldiers, an Indian contingent comprising of all the three wings of the military services, marching alongside the French soldiers, to have Indian Rafales doing the fly past, all this is not just symbolic. It signifies the importance that the French are attaching to defense cooperation. Hello, is there some background noise?
We can hear you, sir.
No.
Please go ahead.
All right. Now, this aspect of defense cooperation is most visible during this visit, and the deals which are being signed are of great significance for India and, of course, for France, because we need high quality defense equipment. Look, our geostrategic environment is the most dangerous. You have Pakistan on one side, you have China on the northern borders. Both have very hostile intentions. Pakistan occupies 78,000 square kilometers of Indian territory. China occupies 38,000 square kilometers of Indian territory. And yet, they are coveting more. Their intentions continue to be extremely aggressive. We are taking them on. But there is a dimension of a threat from the seas which cannot be ignored. And this is why the Navy has been asking for better quality planes and better quality equipment, including more submarines. So it is very significant that a deal is going to be signed for France to supply India with 36 Rafale M's, which are the version of the Rafale which are with us, but for the use on the maritime area. They can land on aircraft.
Right.
Of course, our defense officers will amplify more of that. The Scorpions, we already have 6 Scorpions which were manufactured jointly by France and India at the Mazatlan House, but we are going to get more. So this aspect of defense cooperation is extremely important. But then there are some other points which I would like to just briefly touch upon. As you mentioned, this is the 25th anniversary of the India-France strategic partnership, and the meetings that will be taking place will be directed at seeing how to take the relationship forward. There are many decisions which are going to be taken which pertain to various areas, like, for instance, the environment, climate change, nuclear energy, education, healthcare. There is a whole range of activities. But in this, the aspect of economic cooperation will be very, very important. France and India already have a thriving economic partnership. Bilateral trade between the two countries is around $11 billion. And there are 1,000 French companies which are operating in India, and they have a turnover of around $20 billion. 210 Indian companies are operating in France, and they have a huge investment in that country. So the economic relationship is already very important. But the fact that a meeting of the Indo-French Business Cooperation Council will be taking place to coincide with the Prime Minister's visit underlines the fact that the two sides attach a great deal of importance on how to take the economic relationship forward.
Absolutely.
Then, of course, as you mentioned, there are some decisions which have been taken. For instance, opening a new Indian consulate in Marseille, the decision to allow UPI payments, the 5-year-long visa for post-studies for master's students. All these are directed at the welfare of the common person. So it is not only in matters of defense and economic cooperation, but for the welfare of the common man.
Absolutely.
That are very significant.
No doubt about that. Yes. And the talks that are going to take place tonight, like you said, sir, are going to touch upon many areas of cooperation. But yes, defense ties seem to be topping the agenda. Let me go across to Vice Admiral Ajendra Bahadur Singh at this point. Sir, you know, the much talked about Rafale deal and Scorpion submarine deal. Now, it is priced at around 90,000 crore. 26 Rafale marine fighter jets, 3 Scorpion submarines for the Indian Navy, and a deal to jointly develop an aircraft engine in India with transfer of technology. All of this is expected to happen when the two leaders meet. How significant do you think this is for the Indian Navy? And how important is this to take the India-France partnership to the next level? I think we also have to remember here that transfer of technology now seems to be a very important component of India's defense strategy and foreign policy as well.
Thank you, Neha. Let me at the outset say I fully agree with the ambassador. Second is, it's a historic occasion. And any historic occasion must bring with it steps in which both sides move together forward and thereafter cooperate in the best manner that is possible. There's a wide range of activity which is happening on the other fronts, such as the cybersecurity, cooperation, extension of visas, and things like that. But I'm going to focus on the defense part of it, and I think this is most significant in this 25th year of Indo-French military partnership. Now, first and foremost, let's come to the Rafales. As you brought out, what I want to bring out here is, traditionally, such high-value deals are to be done between governments. And therefore, I fully endorse this government-to-government deal, which is going to happen. The things will hopefully get worked out after the decision by the two sides, levels. But I must also tell you that the Indian Navy has got 2 aircraft carriers. We have had an operational gap because we did not have adequate number of fighters to fly from our aircraft carriers. And Rafale, the naval variant of it, is going to fulfill that a big void which has existed. Now, I want to say that first and foremost, it meets all the NSQRs, the naval staff qualitative requirements, whether it is from air, sea, or ground attack version. All the parameters, we did check them out when I was the CNC in Western Naval Command, were checked out at the shore-based test facility in Goa. And this is a twin-engine aircraft, ideally suited for our STOBA carriers. And I think the government-to-government transaction is the most appropriate in this case. I would also bring out that the Indian Navy will benefit from the IF experience in this case, because Air Force has already got these, and we are going to use their test facilities. We are going to use the same missiles which the Air Force is using. So there will be a commonality of support infrastructure, the MROs, and things to that effect. It is also an aircraft which is going to be future ready. Now, when I say it's future ready, it's going to be able to integrate the Rudram as and when it gets online, the NASAM MR, which is a naval version, and a whole lot of other PGMs and other weapons that are being developed by the Indian DRDO and other agencies. Most significantly, I think it will fill a big void, especially because it is air-to-air refueling capable. It carries with it the Exocet missile, the Scalp missile, which are a class of their own. And this will be inducted in a phased manner. All the issues have been taken care of in the staff process, and large number of deliberations have happened. And I hope that the leadership on both sides comes together to make this huge step forward. In my opinion, it's a huge step forward to do this entire thing.
Certainly.
Moving on.
Go ahead, sir, complete your point.
Moving on to the Scorpion submarines, the Indian Navy has inducted 5 Scorpion submarines already. The 6th one is under construction at the Mazagao Docks Limited. Now, we have to remember that we lost our expertise at construction of conventional submarines when we stopped the earlier German line. So I think this is the most appropriate decision given the fact that the 75 India and the 76 program are still not on the horizon. We are still under discussion zone. This is going to be filling the void because our submarines are getting old, and because this will be an upgraded version of the submarine, I'm not fully aware as to what are the contours of this decision making, but I am certain that the AIP, the air independent propulsion, and the scalp missile will form a part of the deal. And this will bring in huge capability, arrest the decline in the numbers of submarines that we have today, and of course, keep the P-75 line open, by which I think the expertise will be retained in the country. It's a great decision, in my opinion, to be taken forward, and we hope that all things will fall into place as and when the discussions are held at the staff level to make sure that we get good products in a time-bound manner, state-of-the-art technology at the government-to-government discussion. And I think that's the way forward.
That certainly is the way forward, and it does look like that decision has been made and these deals are certainly going to be inked. Captain T.K. Sharma, let me come to you now. You would agree that French combat jets have been the mainstay of India's defense ecosystem for decades now. Even in the 80s, we bought the Mirage fighter planes from France, and then of course 2015 onwards we've had Rafale deals with France. Now, you know, as the Vice Admiral says, that the Indian Navy has been dealing with severe shortages for many years now. He says that these deals are going to fill the void that's existed for a very long time. How significant do you think the deals for the Rafale M fighter jets and the Scorpion submarines are, and especially given the fact that China seems to be rapidly expanding in the Indian Ocean waters, do you believe that the significance of these submarines for the Indian Navy is that much more?
Okay, good evening, Neha, and good evening, Sir Admiral, sir, and also the Ambassador. Well, very, very precisely and comprehensively, I'll try and bring in the importance. You see, we went in for the first IAC, that is INS Vikrant. The keel laying was done in 2009, and eventually in 13 years, last year, we commissioned INS Vikrant at the hands of the Honorable Prime Minister in October. Now, the moot point over here is, where is the fighter element? We have been looking for it, and we are all in India aware of 2 OEMs who were, fighting for it. That is the Boeing and the Dassault Aviation. Tremendous amount of deliberations went into it, trials, this, that, and as he's saying that they came to Goa with their aircraft, and all the trials and whatever the Indian Navy was looking for was done over there. And after a lot of all these things which have happened, an aircraft which has been now selected finally is the Rafale Marine. And I have been made to understand that this is much better than, and it met all our requirements. Keeping that aside, Neha, now the point is that the fighter jet, the carrier-based fighter jet, is the main arm of an aircraft carrier and also of a fleet. So this was affecting the capability of Indian Navy because of the serviceability rate of the MiG-29Ks. And you know it that in 2016, we had decommissioned Virat, which had the element of Sea Harriers on top. So there was a very, very pressing need to fill that gap, which the Admiral said that, a fighter, without a fighter, the aircraft carrier is nothing. And now, since that has been addressed, and this aircraft has been flying from Charles de Gaulle, and it's a proven aircraft, and we have done and we have seen everything. So insofar as doing Rafale Marine for Indian Navy is concerned, I think this is a huge step, and it's going to pay us great dividends in the times to come. Secondly, the Scorpions. Indian Navy had a plan, and a CCS approval was given to Indian Navy to make 24 submarines in 30 years, and that is as far back as 1999. We had two types of submarines before this, that is the Foxtrot class, which came between 1968 and 73, which were paid off eventually by 2010. And the second line of submarines which we got was EKMs, which came from Russia from 1986 onwards, and we inducted the last one in 1999-2000. Both these class of boats have done a tremendous service for Indian Navy, and now what we are looking at is paying off the EKMs also. And as the Admiral brought out, we have only 5 new submarines, the Calvary class, which has been made by MDL with the participation with Naval Group France. So now we have an inventory of old boats and new boats, but these old boats are all 30 years plus. So, and the new project in which the 75 India has to be made is somewhere on the horizon, but we don't know where, when. So now comes the point of plugging the gap. Old boats are going away, new boats are less in number, and this line of Scorpions, which has given us 6 boats, the 6th one is undergoing trials, so it will be available to us maybe early next year. So that line of production will be kept alive by this deal, and it is a huge boost for Indian Navy, the submarine arm, that at least we will have the boats. And of course, these 3 boats, what I know is that they will be better than the previous ones, maybe more stealth, TLAM capability, and of course the AIP plug, which Admiral is telling you. So addressing these 2 things, and this is going to make the Indian Navy very, very competent and a very, very potent force insofar as Iowa region is concerned. And if you have a look at the last 10 years, what all we have got, it's state of the art. It is state of the art. P-8Is, the Apaches, the Chinooks, the Romeos, the Predators, the Rafales, the Rafale Marines, the Scorpions, you name it. Indian Navy has got, or the Indian Armed Forces have got whatever they wanted. So I think this is one of those landmark deals, which of course the last visit in US got us the Predators, and this visit to France is getting us and plugging a lot of gaps in our capabilities, which will be very, very good.
Plugging a lot of gaps in our capabilities and a much needed acquisition for the Indian Army that has been, Indian Navy, I beg your pardon, which has been dealing with many shortages for a long time now. Ambassador Prabhudaya, let me come back to you, looking once again at the broader canvas of this bilateral relationship. You know, there are some who say that France is one of the few countries that has truly stood by India through thick and thin over the years and decades. Even, for example, in the aftermath of India's 1998 nuclear tests, France was one of the few countries that offered support to India, opposed the sanctions that were imposed on India. And even when you talk about the issue of transfer of technology, while the United States has agreed to do it only now in 2023, France has been doing it for decades now. But considering where the relationship stands today and where it needs to go forward, how do you think the French really look at it? Apart from the bilateral significance of this relationship, there is the global dimension as well. There is the China factor. It's growing expansionism in the Indo-Pacific, where France is an important player. And at the same time, there is the Russia factor, with the West obviously taking a strident anti-Russia stance since the invasion of Ukraine. And also there seems to be this attempt to wean India away from its huge dependence on Russia for arms supplies. Do you believe that, the India-France relationship also needs to be looked at through the prism of these global factors, especially China and Russia?
Well, I'm not an I'm not an expert in military matters, but I do understand that our dependence on Russia is coming down. Russia was by far the biggest supplier of defense equipment to us, but the volume of exports is coming down, and we are diversifying the range from which we are now importing. Between 2017 and 2021, France ranked just behind Russia in terms of exports of military equipment to India. And the way things are proceeding, France is poised to increase its share of the imports of defense equipment by India. Now, France has a lot to gain. You know, the deals which are going to be signed during the current visit of the Prime Minister are being valued at around
90,000 crore.
90,000 crores. Okay, $1.3 billion, which is a big amount. But then, when it comes to defense, we are not going to make any compromises. We need high quality defense equipment, and the French manufactured stuff is as good as any. Let me mention that when we are buying the French Rafale M aircraft, then the competition was very intense from the American-made Hornets. But we have chosen the French product because we found that for a variety of reasons, these were more suitable. Now, let me also mention that as regards the China factor, you know, we face the threat from China more directly than France does. We face China across the line of actual control. And the Chinese have been following a policy of developing what is being called the string of pearls. These are ports which the Chinese are setting up, financing, and it remains open to how they will use it. Of course, they have helped with the construction of the port of Gwadar in Pakistan. They own and control the port of Hambantota in Sri Lanka. These pose very direct threats to us. The Chinese have also been involved in the development of a port in Maldives and the Chittagong port. Although these two countries have assured us, that is the Maldives and Bangladesh, that these ports will not be used for military purposes. But you know, with the Chinese, you can never tell. When the time is opportune for them, they can arm twist and have their way. So the fact of the matter is that the threat to India in the maritime domain is something that would be ignored only at our own peril. This is something that the two distinguished panelists from the naval background would be able to explain more. But we cannot overlook the threat from Chinese expansionism in the oceans which surround us. We are taking care of that. And that is why, if it was felt that we needed more submarines, we are going and getting it. And if we needed a Rafale, we are getting them. I don't know, somebody is speaking there.
No, sir, go ahead. Please complete your point.
All right. You know, so the point which I am trying to make is that nobody has to wean us away from China. We have told the Chinese in very clear terms that unless the situation at the borders can be normalized, there is no question of pursuing a relationship with China which is on the lines of hunky-dory. Everything is okay, and the situation at the borders will sort itself out. No, we have made it clear that as long as there is tension at the borders, as long as the situation there is not normal, we will not have a normal relationship with China. Now,
Right.
the French, of course, stand to gain because it's good business for them. We stand to gain because we strengthen our defense capabilities. So it's a situation where the two countries need to cooperate for each other's benefit and for their own benefit. I think this
Absolutely.
is
Foreign
this
policy is
situation.
always about self-interest. Let's be very clear about it. And when I was talking about weaning away, I was talking about Russia, not China. But your point is well taken, sir. I'm completely out of time. So very, very quickly, I'll take closing comments from the Vice Admiral and Captain D.K. Sharma, starting with Vice Admiral Ajendra Bahadur Singh. Sir, how important is the China factor in this relationship? We've talked about it in the context of the India-US relationship. But it is a big factor in the India-French partnership as well. We've seen China's growing expansionism in the Indian Ocean waters, in the Indo-Pacific. In the Indo-Pacific, France is also a big player. France is one of those countries that has expressed its concern about China's growing hegemony. India faces the biggest threat, of course, in its maritime borders from China. Therefore, how important do you think is the China factor now in this relationship?
Yeah, Neha, thank you so much. First and foremost, I would like to say that the maritime domain is going to be the most complex domain, which is be in play during the next 10-15 years. And primarily it is the growth of China, the rivalry, and the Indian Ocean is already being challenged by the Chinese as not an Indian Ocean, for that,
Correct.
India's ocean for that matter. But I want to come back beyond this. Two important facts I want to say about the Rafale induction. First and foremost, you must remember that Rafale Marine was the first aircraft that was developed for the French Navy. And then the Rafale came for the French Air Force. And that is the norm world over, that once you develop the maritime version of the aircraft, it is the more difficult part of it. And therefore, when you come to the land-based version, it's much easier.
Right.
In our case, the TEDBEF program, the twin-engine deck-based fighter program, which is being taken up by the ADA, we are looking at timelines of, first flights by 2028 and maybe the IOC by 2032. I must tell you that the Indian Navy fully supports the TEDBEF program. It has put large number of assets there. It has put good officers who are going to monitor this program. And I think there is a huge investment that the Indian Navy is making in this TEDBEF program. So TEDBEFs are going to replace the MiG-29Ks as and when they come up for decommissioning. So first and foremost, it's not just a one-off deal. It's a lot of make in India. The submarines are to be constructed in Mascot Docks Limited. The MROs and the airframes, the sensors.
So I'm so sorry, but I'm completely out of time now. So we'll have to perhaps bring you back on another show to go into all those details of these deals. But I was wrapping up the discussion, and therefore I brought in the China angle to just look at the big picture. Captain D.K. Sharma, very quick closing comments because we have our guest, next guest waiting for us. Quick closing comments from you. How important is the China factor in all of this? And therefore, how important is this acquisition for the Indian Navy?
One single line.
Yes.
Had the China thing not happened, had the Galwan thing not happened, all these things which we are getting now would have come eventually, but not at this speed. So we know the threat, we know what is in our backyard, who is challenging us, and what all needs to be geared up. And this government, I must compliment them, the Ministry of Defense, the Government of India, and the Prime Minister himself, the way these actions have been taken. Decisions have been taken, though a little late in the day, but this addresses all the problem. And let me tell you, things will be better in the IOR once all these assets are in place. You will not find the Chinese aggression or coercion or coming into our area of operations and do what they are able to pull now. That's it.
That's interesting. You believe it is likely to be a deterrent? I mean, that might be difficult to predict at this point, but certainly a very important acquisition for the Indian Navy as it deals with an increasingly aggressive China. I think that is something we can all agree on. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, Vice Admiral Ajendra Bahadur Singh, and Captain T.K. Sharma, thank you so much to all three of you for joining us and sharing your time and perspective with us on the Prime Minister's visit to France and those very important defense deals. All right, let's now go across to our next guest. I'm now joined by former Foreign Secretary of India, Ambassador Shashank. Sir, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome back to Global Lens. Let me begin by asking you, sir, how significant do you think is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to France? He was the guest of honor, as we know, at the Bastille Day parade. We are marking 25 years of the strategic partnership. The Prime Minister has described it as a long-standing and time-tested one. How significant is this visit according to you?
I would say it's an extremely important visit, a timely recognition from both sides, from the French side that India is a desirable friend, and even if there are opinions in Europe critical of India or Prime Minister Modi, France has to take a decisive action at the leadership level that they must emphasize the great partnership and great potential of our relationship between India and France. You know that when India became independent, France was one of the first countries which handed over all their colonial possessions in India to the Indian Prime Minister and suggested that India should now become really an important country in the developing world. The same way what they had done to the United States when they had handed over Louisiana and some other French possessions there. So I think that is starting from that. And then they have been with us on the space program. They have been with us on the defense technology, on the other technology spheres. And finally, at the time of 1998 Pokhran tests, when others were either imposing sanctions on us or threatening sanctions, France was the one which came ahead with us and said that, all right, we are with you, and we set up the first strategic partnership with France. So that has to be recognized very strongly by people. You're quite right,
sir. France has stood by India in ways that very few countries have. Sir, give me a moment. We'll come back to you. The French president is speaking right now. Let's listen in for a few minutes.
एजेंडा और नया वित्तीय वैश्विक कॉम्पैक्ट पर इकट्ठे काम किया है. हम आपने सितंबर में जो दुनिया के राष्ट्राध्यक्ष होंगे, जो हेड्स ऑफ स्टेट और गवर्नमेंट होंगे, उनको आमंत्रित किया है. और हम सब चाहते हैं कि एक ऐसे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय व्यवस्था का स्थापना हो जो शांति और विकास की ओर हमें ले जाए. मुझे बहुत गर्व हुआ था जब 2018 में मैंने आपके साथ अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सौर गठबंधन की स्थापना की थी. और हम चाहते हैं कि बिजली का उत्पादन 2030 तक 1000 गीगावाट का हो. और हमने आपके पिछले जो यात्रा थी उसके दौरान भी हमने एक नया पहल शुरू किया था प्लास्टिक से संघर्ष का. तो ये जो दो उदाहरण हैं वो दर्शाते हैं कि हम अगर इकट्ठे काम करें तो हम सारे क्षेत्रों में नई संरचना बना सकते हैं, ना सिर्फ जहां युद्ध से बचने के लिए. पर G20 COP28 और जो संयुक्त राष्ट्र के समुद्र पर सम्मेलन होने जा रहा है नीस में 2025 में, उसका आयोजन भी हम इकट्ठे कर सकते हैं. तो हमारे जो सामरिक हित हैं वो उसका अभिसरण हम इंडो पैसिफिक तक जाता है, क्योंकि हमारे एक ही दृष्टिकोण है इसके बारे में. हम आधिपत्य से लड़ना चाहते हैं. हम हमारे सशस्त्र बल नियमित बातचीत कर रहे हैं और पूरी योगदान कर रहे हैं ताकि जो शांति है और सुरक्षा है इस क्षेत्र में बनाई रहे और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय कानून का सम्मान रहे. ये जो सामरिक आत्मीयता है हमारी दोनों देशों के बीच में, वो ठोस रूप ले रही है नए योजनाओं के साथ, खासकर जो आर्थिक योजनाएं हम इकट्ठे कर रहे हैं। भारत आज दूसरे सबसे बड़ा हमारा साझेदार है एशिया में। हमने नए कार्य क्षेत्र ढूंढे हैं, जैसे कि स्टील, अंतरिक्ष, ऊर्जा, सिविल, न्यूक्लियर और टेक्नोलॉजी। ये जो नया स्थिति है जिसकी ओर हम अपनी द्विपक्ष साझेदारी को ले जा रहे हैं, वो सिर्फ उन महिलाओं और पुरुषों की वजह से बना पाएंगे जो रोजाना इन संबंधों को जीते हैं, और उनमें से कई सारे आज रात के डिनर पर हमारे साथ आएंगे। और फिर हम युवा पीढ़ी को नहीं भूल सकते, क्योंकि भारत और फ्रांस में युवा ही आगे भविष्य की फ्रांस की छवि भारत में और भारत की छवि फ्रांस में इसको नया रुख देगी और उसको अब पुनर्निर्मित करेगी। 2025 में हमने सोचा था कि 20,000 फ्रांस के स्टूडेंट्स भारत तक पहुंचाएंगे, और कोविड के बावजूद हम इस लक्ष्य को पा पाए हैं, और हम समझते हैं कि यहाँ से 2030 तक 30,000 ऐसे स्टूडेंट्स को भेजेंगे और हमारे प्रयास इसकी ओर जाएंगे। और हम चाहते हैं कि जो युवा भारतीय फ्रांस में पढ़ने के निर्णय लेते हैं, उनको आगे भी अपने दिल के करीबी देश के में आने का मौका दिया जाना चाहिए। इसलिए हम अपना वीजा की
All right. The French President Emmanuel Macron is speaking there at Elysee Palace as he welcomes Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Of course, there will be delegation-level talks between the two sides a short while from now before the state banquet. Let me go back to our guest, Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary of India, who's with us on the show. So my apologies for interrupting you there. We had to cut across to the French President, who is welcoming Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Sir, if you could just complete your thought. You were earlier saying how France stood by India at a time when few other countries did. For example, in the aftermath of the 1998 nuclear test, when others rushed to impose sanctions on us, France was one country that actually opposed those sanctions. Not only that, the US may want to take the high moral ground today and make a big deal of sharing technology with us. Finally, in 2023, France is something that has done that for years and decades, and that to 100% transfer of technology.
I agree with you. Only thing is that USA is a superpower and they have their global interests. France cannot disregard that. We also cannot disregard that. And therefore, we are grateful to France that even in changing the American position with regard to our nuclear program, the French president played a good role and a very positive role for India. So I think this is an important thing, that at that time, the European countries had helped us and they were able to change the mind at the policy-making level in the United States. But I must, of course, congratulate the American leadership and the Indian leadership of that time, that they were able to move forward very focused manner for a strategic partnership. First, they took the next steps, then they took strategic partnership, and then the Americans went to the extent of persuading China to make an exception for India in giving the nuclear technology to India and whatever we wanted at that time, to make an exception. Now, of course, there are many other international groupings on which we have to work hard along with France, USA, other countries, including China and Russia, that we become members of all these groupings as a nuclear power. So I think that stage, that is continuing. At the same time, France is offering us all kinds of defense technologies and is willing to produce, even for the 5th generation, a co-production of a new technology where Safran, which is the French aircraft engine manufacturing company, is willing to work with DRDO and HAL to develop this in India. So that will be really a great day when we can develop this engine directly. In the meantime, of course, the Americans have agreed to give us the GE engine and have it made in India, which will be useful for our Tejas. So I think therefore we cannot put one against the other, but I think both of them are moving together, and the leaderships in both countries are taking decisive steps despite the feelings of some people or media or NGOs in both countries to say that India is moving away from democracy or India is moving away from human rights, etc., etc. So, but then they have taken a decision on the basis of the national security of their countries, national security of India, of the world, of Asia. And I think that is the most important thing.
And fact of the matter is that country after country is rolling out the red carpet for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. First the US and now France. Give me another minute, so I'll come back to you. The Prime Minister is now speaking.
एक विकसित देश बनाने का संकल्प लिया है। इस यात्रा में हम फ्रांस को एक नेचुरल पार्टनर के रूप में देखते हैं। 2 दिनों में हमें आपसी सहयोग के सभी क्षेत्रों पर विस्तार से बात करने का अवसर मिल रहा है। आर्थिक संबंधों को और सुदृढ़ करना हमारी साझा प्राथमिकता है। रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी, ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, सेमीकंडक्टर्स, साइबर, डिजिटल टेक्नोलॉजी जैसे अनेक क्षेत्रों में सहयोग बढ़ाने के लिए हम नए इनिशिएटिव्स की पहचान कर रहे हैं। भारत के यूपीआई यानी यूनिफाइड पेमेंट्स इंटरफेस को फ्रांस में लॉन्च करने पर समझौता हुआ है। हम दोनों देशों के स्टार्टअप और इनोवेशन इकोसिस्टम को आपस में जोड़ने पर बल दे रहे हैं। समान विचारधारा वाले देशों के साथ मिलकर हमें टेक्नोलॉजी सप्लाई चेन्स के लोकतंत्रीकरण के लिए लगातार काम करना चाहिए। क्लाइमेट चेंज और पर्यावरण सुरक्षा हमारी साझा और मुख्य प्राथमिकता रही है। इस दिशा में हमने पहले ही इंटरनेशनल सोलर अलायंस स्थापित किया था, जो अब एक मूवमेंट बन गया है। अब हम ब्लू इकोनॉमी और ओशन गवर्नेंस के रोडमैप पर तेजी से काम करना चाहते हैं। सिंगल यूज प्लास्टिक के खिलाफ हम एक साझा पहल पर आगे बढ़ेंगे। इंडियन ऑयल और फ्रांस की टोटल कंपनी में एलएनजी के निर्यात के लिए जो लॉन्ग टर्म एग्रीमेंट हुआ है, मैं उसका स्वागत है। इससे हमारे क्लीन एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन के लक्ष्यों को बल मिलेगा। अब से कुछ देर बाद हम भारत फ्रांस सीईओज फोरम में भी हिस्सा लेने वाले हैं। दोनों देशों के बिजनेस प्रतिनिधियों के साथ आर्थिक सहयोग मजबूत करने पर विस्तार से चर्चा होगी। फ्रेंड्स, रक्षा सहयोग हमारे संबंधों का एक मूलभूत स्तंभ रहा है। यह दोनों देशों के बीच गहरे आपसी विश्वास का प्रतीक है। मेक इन इंडिया और आत्मनिर्भर भारत, इसमें फ्रांस एक अहम पार्टनर है। आज हम रक्षा के क्षेत्र में भारत में नई टेक्नोलॉजी के को प्रोडक्शन और को डेवलपमेंट पर बात करेंगे। सबमरीन हो या फिर नौसेना के जहाज, हम चाहते हैं कि मिलकर केवल अपनी ही नहीं, तीसरे मित्र देशों की जरूरतों को भी पूरा करने के लिए हम काम करें। हमारी डिफेंस स्पेस एजेंसीज के बीच सहयोग बढ़ाने की संभावनाएं हैं। फ्रांस की कंपनियों द्वारा एमआरओ फैसिलिटीज, स्पेयर पार्ट्स, हेलीकॉप्टर के लिए इंजन का प्रोडक्शन भी भारत में किए जाने पर हम आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। हम इसमें हमारे सहयोग को और सशक्त करने पर बल देंगे। सिविल न्यूक्लियर क्षेत्र में सहयोग को आगे बढ़ाते हुए हम स्मॉल एंड एडवांस मॉड्यूलर रिएक्टर्स में सहयोग की संभावना पर चर्चा करेंगे। आज भारत में चंद्रयान के सफल लॉन्च पर पूरा भारत उत्साहित है। यह हमारे वैज्ञानिकों की बहुत बड़ी उपलब्धि है। अंतरिक्ष के क्षेत्र में भारत और फ्रांस का पुराना और गहरा सहयोग है। हमारी स्पेस एजेंसीज के बीच नए समझौते हुए हैं। इसमें सैटेलाइट लॉन्च सर्विसेज, समुद्र और धरती के तापमान और वातावरण को मॉनिटर करने के लिए तृष्णा सैटेलाइट बनाने का काम शामिल है। स्पेस बेस्ड मैरीटाइम डोमेन अवेयरनेस जैसे क्षेत्रों में भी हम अपना सहयोग बढ़ा सकते हैं। फ्रेंड्स, भारत और फ्रांस के बीच लंबे समय से गहरे पीपल टू पीपल कांटेक्ट रहे हैं। हमारी आज की चर्चाओं से ये संबंध और मजबूत होंगे। हम फ्रांस के दक्षिण में मार्से शहर में नया भारतीय कॉन्सुलेट खोलेंगे। फ्रांस में पढ़े हुए भारतीय मूल के लोगों के लिए लॉन्ग टर्म वीजा देने के निर्णय का हम स्वागत करते हैं। हम फ्रांस के विश्वविद्यालयों को भारत में अपने कैंपस स्थापित करने के लिए आमंत्रित करते हैं। दिल्ली में बनाए जाने वाले नए राष्ट्रीय म्यूजियम में फ्रांस एक पार्टनर के रूप में जुड़ रहा है। अगले वर्ष पेरिस में होने वाले ओलंपिक्स के लिए सभी भारतीय एथलीट्स बहुत ही उत्सुक हैं। इसके सफल आयोजन के लिए मैं राष्ट्रपति मैक्रो और उनकी पूरी टीम को शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। फ्रेंड्स, आज हम कई महत्वपूर्ण क्षेत्रीय और वैश्विक मुद्दों पर भी चर्चा करेंगे। इंडो पैसिफिक के रेसिडेंट पावर्स के रूप में इस क्षेत्र में शांति और स्थिरता के लिए भारत और फ्रांस की विशेष जिम्मेदारी है। हमारे सहयोग को एक रचनात्मक स्वरूप देने के लिए हम इंडो पैसिफिक कोऑपरेशन रोडमैप पर काम कर रहे हैं। इंडो पैसिफिक ट्रायंगुलर डेवलपमेंट कोऑपरेशन फंड के प्रस्ताव पर भी दोनों पक्ष में चर्चा में है। इससे पूरे क्षेत्र में स्टार्टअप्स और इनोवेशन को बढ़ावा देने के नए अवसर खुलेंगे। भारत के इंडो पैसिफिक ओशन इनिशिएटिव्स में फ्रांस द्वारा मैरीटाइम रिसोर्स पिलर को लीड करने के निर्णय का हम स्वागत करते हैं। फ्रेंड्स, कोविड महामारी और यूक्रेन संघर्ष के प्रभाव पूरे विश्व पर पड़े हैं। ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों पर इनका विशेष रूप से नकारात्मक प्रभाव पड़ा है। यह चिंता का विषय है। इन समस्याओं के समाधान के लिए सभी देशों का एकजुट होकर प्रयास करना आवश्यक है। हमारा मानना है कि सभी विवादों का समाधान डायलॉग और डिप्लोमेसी के माध्यम से होना चाहिए। भारत स्थायी शांति की बहाली में योगदान देने के लिए तैयार है। आतंकवाद के विरुद्ध लड़ाई में भारत और फ्रांस हमेशा साथ रहे हैं। हम मानते हैं कि क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म को समाप्त करने के लिए ठोस कार्रवाई की आवश्यकता है। इस दिशा में सहयोग बढ़ाने पर दोनों देश सहमत हैं। राष्ट्रपति मैक्रो इस वर्ष G20 समिट के दौरान आपका भारत में स्वागत करने के लिए मैं और सभी भारतवासी बहुत ही उत्सुक हैं। एक बार फिर आपकी मित्रता और मुझे दिए गए आदर सत्कार के लिए मैं आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं।
All right. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and French President Emmanuel Macron there issuing a joint statement ahead of their one-on-one and delegation level talks that are going to take place shortly at Elysee Palace in Paris. Let's go back to our guest, Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary of India, who's still with us. So my apologies for those interruptions, but of course that was an important joint statement that we've heard from the two leaders. Prime Minister Modi there talking about various areas of cooperation between India and France. he mentioned the space sector in particular. And, it's significant that he emphasized on the element of co-production and co-development in the context of the defense deals, whether it's the Rafale marine fighter jets or the Scorpion submarines. Co-production, co-development, Atmanirbharta, self-reliance, call it what you will, that really seems to have emerged as the big leitmotif of India's defense as well as foreign policy. It was evident during the Prime Minister's recent visit to the US. It's clearly evident here. The Prime Minister then talked about the two countries, laying out the Indo-Pacific cooperation roadmap. And he said, we look forward to welcoming President Macron to India for the G20 summit. Your thoughts, sir, on what you heard the two leaders saying there?
Well, absolutely. I think the co-production and co-development in the defense sector is an extremely important initiative which France and India would be taking. That's number one. Secondly, G20 welcome for President Macron in India has relevance for both countries. France wants to have a European independent approach to international relations. And they have been thinking in terms of a European defense force. And therefore, they have been strengthening the French defense force to become the nucleus of this European defense force to take care of the European interests. They are aware that the First World War and Second World War took place in the European region. They don't want a Third World War to start in the European region by the spread of the war which is going on in Ukraine. And therefore, they would like to take advantage of the G20 summit in India to ensure that this conflict in Europe is brought to an end with the help of the G20. And I think in G20, India has been talking about the support from the global south, number one. Secondly, the large population of Indians, where we have held more than 200 meetings all over the country. So therefore, the initiative which we are taking are meant for the benefit of the people living in India, people of the whole world and of Asia. And therefore, President Macron would like to support that kind of a position. So I think there is a possibility of some new initiatives which may come through between India and France, along with a few other countries who would like this conflict to end at the earliest possible. We know that NATO has been rather slow in agreeing to take Ukraine as a full member of NATO. They say, well, yes, we will take them, but there are certain things which to be filled in. Perhaps they would like to have some kind of an understanding from the Russian government. Now, would that take place or not? We do not know. But I think a beginning has to be made to make sure that peace is brought about in Europe. And secondly, in Asia, we do not reach a similar stage by creating suitable environment in cooperation with our friends like the Americans in Quad and in the Indo-Pacific security with the French. And I think in setting up our defense partnership to new levels. I think these are all very important initiatives for peace in Asia, peace in Europe. And I think India and France can play an important role. There are people in Europe, I know that they have been talking against India, against Prime Minister Modi, but they would all be, in long term, they would all be silenced because they know that the leadership in both countries as well as in USA, they are fully mindful of the importance that we have to have for peace in the world.
Absolutely, and it has been said repeatedly that India can play an important role in ending the Ukraine conflict. The words of advice that Prime Minister Modi had for President Putin at last year's SCO summit, that this is not an era of war, resonated around the world. But since you talked about the Ukraine war, sir, let me also ask you, is this something that is likely to inevitably come up in talks between Prime Minister Modi and President Emmanuel Macron? There is clearly a divergence of views between the West and India on Ukraine war and Russia's role in it, whether it was America's displeasure earlier on with India's refusal to condemn Russia, or even France for that matter. But a lot of these countries seem to have come around and sort of, shown an acceptance and understanding of India's position. The French ambassador on the eve of the Prime Minister's visit, in fact, said the French approach is not to preach or pressurize.
Well, I think President Biden himself had said very clearly that they are not going to influence the Indian position on friendship with Russia. So that is, they have taken care of it. Secondly, Americans are responsible power. They know that that the world should avoid a nuclear conflict at any cost. And if India has been talking continuously to the Russians, to the Ukrainians, to the other powers, therefore that is a force for peace which should be left to work on its own and to help in whenever peace can be achieved, and not to push India too much. Similarly, in the case of Europe, we find that their economies have been harmed greatly by cutting down the supply of oil from Russia. Now, what we are finding that while India has increased the oil supply from Russia, but at the same time, there are many shipments of processed oil, refined oil, which are going to Europe from India. Some of it may be from the Russian side, others may be from other sources. But the point is that the Europeans have benefited from the relationship which India has with Russia. Secondly, the French know that they are now the second largest supplier of armament to India. So that is one way, by encouraging the security perspective and strengthening that vis-a-vis our rival powers in Asia, that France can try to make sure that India does not become overly dependent on Russia, which India in any case does not want to be. What we want is that we should get the weapons of the right technology, transfer, technology development, etc., whether with Russia, with others, and India will continue to do that. So I think there is no divergence of opinion in that regard. There might be people talking against that, but that is, the people can always say whatever they like. It's of course a democratic country in France, democratic country in India, but the point is that the leadership has to take decision which will be for the benefit of peace, harmony, and friendship among countries in Asia and Europe.
Right. And to be fair, the French have exhibited an understanding of and respect for India's position. And I think France would be the last country really to pressurize India vis-a-vis Russia, given that it is one of those countries which, just like India, insists on maintaining its own strategic autonomy. For example, France in its own bilateral relationship with the US has made it very clear that it does not want to get entangled in the big power rivalry between America and China. So strategic autonomy is as important to France as it is to India. But you talked about how France would not want India to be utterly dependent on Russia. India doesn't want that either, given the changing geopolitical reality. But how important do you think, sir, is the China factor in the India-French relationship? We talked about it in the context of the India-US relationship, and you have to inevitably talk about the China factor in the context of this bilateral relationship too. It's always China that's the elephant in the room. Now, we've talked repeatedly about China's growing expansionism, which isn't lost on anyone. And in the Indo-Pacific, if India faces a direct threat in its maritime borders from China, well, then France is also an important player there, isn't it?
Well, India would not like to overplay the Chinese threat or Chinese dimension in our relationship with France. India, as we said, that we wanted to develop our own capabilities in the nuclear and other space fields, and France has been very supportive of that role. And we have had the strategic partnership starting from 1998. Therefore, we have to keep in mind that friendship with France is very important for our own ambitions in our national development sectors. Secondly, we want the French friendship with us in those defense areas which are important for the defense and security of our country. Then we have been participating with them in the technology sector, in the computers, in cyber, in solar energy. Now we want to go in with the clean hydrogen, green hydrogen. So I think there are so many areas. So therefore, we have to keep in mind that China has developed relations with USA and France to such an extent that they are linked together in their economic and technical field. So if the Americans and France want to hurt China, the Chinese can also equally hurt these other countries. So therefore, we have to reach a situation whereby we can benefit from our partnership with other countries, but we do not want China to flex its muscles either with us or with other Asian countries. And therefore, what we are doing is developing a friendship with the other Asian countries. We are making it very clear to China that we do not want India's security interests to be hurt by whatever bases or other facilities they are trying to develop in our neighboring countries. And especially with regard to their BRI or CPEC, we know that they are directly hurting our One India policy, our issue on Kashmir, which is legally part of India. Therefore, they have to be very clear in their mind in understanding the public sentiments in India that no government would be willing to befriend China at any cost if they continue to hurt the Indian sovereign rights. So therefore, these are the various issues. I think the French interests with India are very important for us. Chinese are only marginally linked in that. We will make sure that Chinese don't hurt us. But at the same time, we have to build our ties with France and with the Americans to a much greater extent. The Chinese had done that in the
Independent
past.
is China and the threat
Yes,
it poses. You're quite right there, sir. Let me ask you a final question, though it's a two-pronged one. Before we let you go, I'd like to have your thoughts on whether you believe that AUKUS can be a factor at all in the India-France relationship, because in 2021, when AUKUS came into existence, France was very upset because it had to, because Australia scrapped its, $90 billion contract for submarines with France, and France felt it had been backstabbed. There was a lot of talk at that time about how India and France needed to work closer together. Of course, since then, France and Australia have mended their ties. Do you believe AUKUS is a factor at all in this bilateral relationship between India and the US? That's one. And two, the negotiations for an India-European Union free trade agreement. Both India and France want it, but are the approaches different? Is that an obstacle?
Well, the problem, let's say first AUKUS. We know that France was very hurt because the Australians never informed them that they were secretly negotiating on AUKUS with UK and USA, and they were bringing them in. In fact, the Australian interests were very much hurt with regard to their ties with China and France. So I think the Australians were told immediately after that they were nothing but like whatever the Chinese were. They always use some bad words like the chewing gum on some boot, somebody's boot or something like this. So therefore, French are cooperating with India. But this is not a nuclear submarine that we are cooperating in. We know that on the nuclear submarine field, we'll have to build up a different kind of relationship, which we have with Russia, or we can try to develop them on our own. But there are also issues that the nuclear submarines make a lot of noise, and that they move fast, but they can be easily monitored by our adversaries. And therefore, these submarines that we are going to take, that they will be of more direct interest to us if they are linked together with our developing the naval facilities and triad facilities in the Andaman Islands, because that is the area which is of great interest to us, which is of almost all the trade passes through Andaman Straits, going to, let's say, Japan, Korea, China, and other places. And therefore, we have to just make sure that these states, these Indian ocean waters, they remain peaceful. And this is the message which we have to give to them. And the French are cooperating with us in that. The French may be having an idea that if they can replace Russia as the number one supplier to India, then why not? But that is okay. That is their ambition. They want to have an independent foreign policy with regard to America. But I think Americans are Americans. I think they are the most important player in NATO. And I don't think the Europeans are in a position as yet to get away from NATO. They have to abide by the NATO decisions. They may try to delay, but that's a different matter. And I think we have to just see that the French remain with us. And at a time when we should have been made the permanent member of the Security Council after our independence, or even when the UN was set up. At that time, the USA and UK did not do the desirable thing. We had put about 2.5 million people in the Second World War, 1.5 million in the First World War. And in the UN peacekeeping operations, India has been one of the largest suppliers. But at the same time, we found that now France is taking that lead. Russians have been taking the lead to make India as a partner. USA has agreed. So let us hope that these countries together would be able to persuade China that India would be a good player as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And therefore, that is the role that we would like to play, a bigger role for India, not just to take China as the main factor in our relationship with France or USA.
Absolutely. And the Prime Minister, in fact, in an interview to a French publication on the eve of this visit, did make that point about how it is absolutely unacceptable that the world's most populous nation and the largest democracy in the world does not have a seat at the high table of the UN Security Council in terms of being a permanent member. We certainly seem to enjoy support from France. Of course, China is a whole different story altogether. But Ambassador Shashank, as always, sir, an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and perspective and for decoding for us the significance of this visit.
Thank you, Neha. I've enjoyed talking to you on these subjects.
Thank you so much, sir. Look forward to having you back on my show very soon.
All right. Okay. Take care.
Well, that's all the time we have on Global Lens tonight. Of course, the focus has been on the high-profile visit of Prime Minister Modi to France. Those talks are taking place as we speak between Prime Minister Modi and President of France, Emmanuel Macron, at Elysee Palace, and some big-ticket defense deals are likely to be inked. This is being seen as a very important visit for the bilateral relationship. And remember, this is the 25th year of the Indo-French strategic partnership. With that, it's a wrap on the show. Thanks so much for watching. Do join us again on Global Lens next week at the same time. Have a great weekend.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. Streaming now.
Welcome to our special broadcast on Manipur. Manipur is witnessing one of the worst ethnic clashes in decades. But what is worrisome is the fact that the world over the debate has been done on the religious line, tool to interfere in India's internal affairs. But I would say that's yesterday's matter. That has been answered. But how do people in Manipur are living their lives? What are they doing in Manipur? For how long do they get electricity? How much water is available to them? Markets, are they open through the day? Can they access things which they used to 60 days ago? You see, meeting between Biren Singh and other people can happen. You know, the nominalness of destruction of bunkers can happen. Army can patrol. But what is the real picture? Are students going to school in full capacity? Is ghettoization coming to an end? Are Metis and Cookies started to have to work in same offices? What is this new sense of normalcy which we are talking about? You know, there's also a rumor-free number which they have provided, 9233 522 822.